For God is the one who provides seed for the farmer and then bread to eat. In the same way, God will provide and increase your resources and then produce a great harvest of generosity in you. Yes, you will be enriched in every way so that you can always be generous. And when we take your gifts to those who need them, they will thank God. Earn all you can. Save all you can. And now the best part. Give all you can. This is how John Wesley looked at the entirety of the Bible and summed up God's teaching for us on money. Earn all you can. Save all you can. Give all you can. And over the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about those first two because finances are so stressful. And this COVID crisis and many of you and us losing jobs in our families or just being stretched, suddenly it's like a magnifying glass is on the issue of finances and how stressed out it can make us. And we're hungry for biblical teaching on how to do it differently, how God would have us do it differently. So we talked about how struggling with finances can feel like being in a room that is filling up with water and you have this much breathing room and you're just treading as fast as you can. And when that is our financial situation, as it is, I told you, for 78% of Americans, so don't feel bad if that's how you feel right now, okay? That's 80% of us, right, are in that situation, just barely having any breathing room. Well, when we're in that situation, it's impossible for us to be like, oh, well, let's be generous. I'm barely holding on. And so the first teaching is so important that we raise the ceiling, right, with our earning as high as we can, right? Raising our income so that we're creating space between us and that water, okay? I can breathe. We talked about how God blesses our skills and helps us earn all we can. And if that's a message you need and you missed, go back and listen. That's the beauty of technology, right? And then last week we talked about how saving all we can lowers the water level until we have this huge space, hopefully all the way to the floor. We're not standing in water and all. We have this huge space to live in, and we can get to the last part, the best part. And that is to give all we can. To give all we can. Now, this generosity is like a golden thread that runs through the Bible. That as long as people have been interacting with God, there is something within us that longs to be generous, that longs to see the impact of our lives beyond ourselves. And one of the ways we get to that is through generosity of resources, right? And it's my contention that most of the believers I've met, we have a deep longing to be generous. It's just so often the financial situation is so bad that we have no capacity. So we see this generosity as a golden thread through the Bible. The very first interactions between God and people are responding to God's love and mercy with gifts. Cain and Abel bring offerings from their flocks and from their farms. And Abram, when he has this great victory, he offers to God 10%. That's our first tithe, right? 10% is a tithe. It comes off the top, it comes first. Jacob follows in the footsteps of Abraham in offering God regularly, whatever he has, 10%. And we see that golden thread throughout, right? Like it becomes part of the law that 10% is what we return to God so that the world can change, right? So that the storehouses of blessing can be full and the hungry can be fed and everyone can have enough, right? It's throughout the Bible, and the Proverbs praise it as wisdom and the Psalms sing about it as joy and blessing. And when the people turn away from that generosity and turn in on themselves and are like, we're just going to earn all we can, we're going to save all we can, and yay for us, right? There's times when the prophets will tell the people, not only do you need your heart to go back to God, but you need your wallet to return to God. You need to be generous. You need to bring the tithe into the storehouse, right? And then heaven's floodgates will open and God will pour out so much blessing that you don't have room to take it in. And so over and over we see this call to be generous. And that when things go wrong, one of the things that restores, one of the ways we restore our world, ourselves, our society is through generosity. And then our Savior, our amazing Savior, Jesus, who speaks about money, about finances all the time because he knows it stresses us out. He's teaching us not just how to plan and how to save and how to be content and sacrificial, but Jesus talks about giving, about how giving unplugs the difficulties that money creates in us, about how blessed people are who leave everything to follow him. He talks about the tithe and he blesses the tithe, but he also blesses those who give everything. The widow who gives a few pennies, that's all she had. And so when John Wesley looked at this enormous golden thread, right, that's running through the Bible about God's desire for us to not be stressed by finances, but to use everything that comes into our hands in a way that builds us up and changes the world. So he said, well, it sums up like this: earn all you can, save all you can, and then give all you can. And I think a lot of times we rationalize that by like, okay, earn all you can, save all you can, and give whatever you can. But no, it's the call that God puts out there to give all we can. And I wanted to give this sermon to you today. This is a rest day. You know, we came and we sorted all this food and put it onto tables ahead of the Manna Food Pantry. And then on Monday, 170 people, more sometimes, will line up, sometimes 4 hours early before it opens because they need this food. Can you imagine, friends, sitting in the 100-degree heat for 4 hours because you need this food so desperately? This is what generosity can do. It can give hope to lives. And I get chills when I think about this because I know that there was a time when there was one table of food because we were able to provide for 40 families. Now, 40 is a great blessing. But the fact that during COVID and in the midst of a hurricane and in the midst of this financial downturn and all this uncertainty and fear, First United Methodist Church now has 4 tables of food. We've gone from 40 families to 170 families. And it's because of you, because you're driving to get the food and you're coming to sort the food. And college students over the summer who came home, they're here helping, and retirees and winter Texans and staunch members of this church. Those of y'all who don't leave the house during COVID for anything, put on a mask and come here so that when people drive up, every single one of them will have 4 bags of food to take home to their families. We'll have enough to get through the week. That's the heartbeat of this church. And I tell this story to everyone I meet. They say, what's your new church like? I say, my new church, in the heart of a crisis, has grown in their love and care, has grown in their generosity. Like, the darkness can't stop the work of God. It can't stop the heartbeat of these people. I'm so proud of them. Tell that story all the time. And y'all, when I have been meeting with you, I've done a million, it feels like, Zooms. Pastor John and I have done them. And we always ask the same questions. We say, what do you love about this church? And what brought you here? And what are your dreams for us in the future? Because as I listen, I can tell who it is that God has called us to be. And the number one thing that I hear from every group, every Sunday school, young and old, the number one thing that you say, this is what this church is about, is right here in this room. Outreach, you say, and service and evangelism and telling people about Jesus in tangible ways and with our voices and with our love and with our actions. What do we want to see more of at this church? You've said it to me over and over. We live in the poorest county, one of the poorest in the nation. And God put us here to shine the light, to make a difference over and over. One of you said, I came to this church because I was at another church, and we'd come out of worship and people would be talking about where they were going to go eat lunch. So that's the way it's always been when I've come out of churches. You just talk about where you're going to go eat lunch. And she said, I came to this church, and we come out and we're talking about the message, and we're talking about on Monday, we're going to be at the food pantry, or on Tuesday, we're going to be doing Emily's meals, or hey, there's this outreach service project building ramps, or hey, project transformations coming up, or hey, how could we, there's an orphanage, how could we partner with that to change the world? She said, I come here and we're talking about putting hands and feet to the gospel message, and she said, I found my home. And did y'all know that there have been people, I've only met 2, I'm sure there's more of you, but there have been people who have become an active part of this church in the pandemic, like have never sat with us in worship, have never raised their voices to sing with us, have only ever worshiped online. And not only have they joined into our community online, but they've joined in our giving. One of them said, hey, I have the ability to get some fresh produce. This is all canned, non-perishable. I have the ability to get some fresh milk and some fresh fruits and vegetables to 120 families. And I think I want to do it with my new church. Can you get it to people who need it? We said, hot dog, we can. And there's another lady who reached out to me just a couple of weeks ago. She said, my job moved me here, and I've never lived anywhere else but my old hometown. And I've only ever worshiped with you online, but I can tell this is a church that wants to change the world. And she said, I have a freezer and I have a washing machine, and are there some people whose lives it would change if I just gave those away? He said, yes. And I promise you that the more I get to know you and the more you tell me stories, that's going to be the golden thread that is weaving through our history, is our desire to not just have ourselves transformed, but to change the world around us, to be a light in the darkness, to serve. And so it becomes, okay, so that's our passion, that's our heartbeat. What do our finances say? So Susan Helms and I sat down with our budget and we looked up where we are putting money towards our heartbeat. And we found $9,000 designated towards outreach and evangelism, $9,000 total. $9,000 on a $1.2 million budget. Shocked me. It saddened me. I know, even though I can't see your faces right now, I know that it shocks you and it saddens you. Because when you do the math, when you say, okay, well, what's $9,000 out of 1.2 million? The answer is it's 0.0075%. And our call and the heartbeat of our church is to give all we can. It's how we've been spending our summer That's how we've been giving our time. That's what makes us excited to be here, that we might give all we can. And our budget says we're giving less than 1%. So it's time to change, right? It's time to go on a journey. It's time to journey towards that tithe, right? To give all we can. Maybe we won't stop there. Wouldn't that be amazing? But first we have to get there. And so I am calling all of us, not just the church, but every individual and every family to say, okay, to just go home, you guys. Actually, you're at home. You're at home. Get out your software, right? Get out your software where you track your spending. Look at how much you make. Okay, look at how much you give. Just the amount, right? The two amounts. What is it that I earn? And let me tell you, there's debates about gross or net, and I would just say, let's get started. So pick one that as you pray, pick the one. And God's not going to begrudge you that, right? You can start one way and grow to another. Pick how much you earn. And then see, gross or net, don't pick it. You know what it is. Pick one of those two numbers. And then see how much you're giving. And I want you to put the giving number and divide it by your income, and you're going to have a percentage. And I want you to not cringe away from that percentage, but to look at it clear-eyed and say, okay, this is my starting point. For our church, it's 0.0075%. And none of us want to stay there, and we're not. We're starting here. And then the journey we're going to be on is I want to challenge all of us, and I want us to lay our hands on it, and I want us to have clear eyes and hopeful hearts to lay our hands on this, that in 5 years, we will be a tithing church. We will be giving 10% of every dollar that comes in to work in service and outreach and evangelism, to work outside of our walls, to work spreading the good news of Jesus Christ and healing the wounds and working for justice and peace, that we would be this blessing, this storehouse for others. And that at the same time, all of us in our families would be laying our hands on that same goal, that wherever we are, we're making a plan that in 5 years, we would have reached that goal of God's for us, right? To tithe, to give 10%, because it transforms us, because it's the yearning in our hearts, because giving is one of the ways we grow closer to God. And certainly it's the way that the world changes. And I want us to think just for a minute. Think of the hundreds and hundreds of families and individuals who call this church their home. Think of all of us laying hands on this, saying, we don't know how this is going to work, but we're going on this journey, and in 5 years, all of us being at the tithe. Nothing will stop us. We will always have everything that we need and more. That is God's promise, that when we bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, He opens up the floodgates of heaven, and there is so much blessing that not only are we cared for, but we are caring for others. And y'all, I'm gonna admit to you that this, in the heart of a pandemic and after a hurricane, and there's huge economic uncertainty, and we are just like, we have breathing room like this much, that this doesn't feel like the time to get more generous. But it's exactly the time to get more generous, because there will never be a perfect time. Never have I ever found people like, well, we've just got this huge surplus of money, in a church. That's never the case. It's as we become generous that God opens the floodgates, and suddenly there's more than enough. So it always feels scary, and we never know how it's going to work. But as we take those steps, as we commit ourselves, God is faithful. He opens up those waters like the Red Sea, right? It parts before us and we walk through. And so the plan that we're going to set as a church, which I would encourage you as a family, as an individual, is in 5 years, right? We're starting at 0.0075%. That's this church. Next year in our budget, 2021, is going to be 1%. The year after that, it'll be 3, and then 5, and then 7, and in year 5, we're going to get to 10%. And we will. And I don't yet know how. And you probably don't yet know how. But the Lord does. Earn all you can. Save all you can. Give all you can. So that God's goodness will be poured out in our community in this generation. So that heaven will applaud. And so that our Lord will be so thankful that He asked us to be caretakers of this piece of creation. We're just at the beginning. But friends, as we take this journey, we are going to see miracles. Just like we see here, that in the heart of a pandemic, we have almost quadrupled just the food pantry. God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. And when we commit to this with our whole hearts, abundance is the result. Let's give all we can so that our lives change and so that God uses us to change the world.